Thank you, Ravi, for inviting me to give this talk here. Not once, but twice. And I'm sorry that every time we set up a talk, the virus becomes active. But let's hope this one is not as bad. Let me just get straight down to the presentation because it's a longish presentation, and I hope to finish it on time. Otherwise, Falguni, you're going to warn me. Here we go. Thank you very much all. Thank you all for coming. So, reimagining and renewing a national icon. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that this project, what I'm going to show you the work, is a work of a lot of people. A lot of designers are working, besides the people who are constructing the project. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. I have the privilege of talking about all of this work, and I hold responsibility for it. But there are people in our office, which is HCP. We have specialist consultants, and we have CPWD and the ministry, all trying to put this project together. In fact, two of the people who are working on the design are here from Bangalore. Dr. Rao is the landscape. He's working with us on landscape. And Jayshree Podar, Dinesh Himmat Singhe, they are working on fabrics. They are also here. Thank you very much for coming. Let me get on with the presentation. So 4 parts. Central Vista is imagined, and post-independence management of Central Vista, what it's today, and about the project. So what was imagined in a nutshell? So it was the design of Central Vista was inspired by Washington's Capitol complex, Paris's Champs-Élysées. It was meant to be the living center of administration in India and an architectural icon for the government of India, which at that time was the Raj. Here you have 3 images of the National Mall in Washington. Then you have Paris, you have Champs-Élysées, and New Delhi. All of them very similar, many years apart, but all learning from one another. Part of the nation-building projects of those times. Here's the architects, Lutyens, Baker, Swinton, on a site visit. We do better now. And here on the right-hand side, you have the hills in Raisina being flattened to create this wonderful site on which this building was built. So what was the design of the Central Vista about? So you had this gently sloping terrain on which a terrace was formed of this sort, and a grid of orthogonal radial streets was created. There was formal gardens, a processional route was created, tree-lined avenues were put in, and I'm just rushing through what was a very complex process. Buildings that were imagined, this is from a sketch that Lutyens put together, and this is what actually got built. So here you have a grand boulevard running right through the middle here. You have what was Government House, North Block, South Block. You have nodes in between. You have a gateway here, and this is the focal point, gateway and nodes. That's the essential design of the place. So here you have the gateway at one end, India Gate, and you have this is the sketch that Lutyens drew, administrative offices on either side. That's the axis that was formed, the nodes, as you can see. And that was the focal point, Government House. Okay. And that's an early image of what got built. You had Council House on this side. You have North Block, South Block. You have Government House, and this grand axis here in the middle. We all know that the whole complex was appropriated by the people of India straight away after independence. Government House became Rashtrapati Bhavan. The statue of George V was removed. Council House became our parliament. North and South blocks now had the ministries of the government of India. And we appropriated the whole place wholeheartedly. It became the seat of the government of India. The post-independence management of Central Vista was unfortunately not very good. Until the 60s, the old vision still prevailed. So I must say, here you have images just after independence. You have Rashtrapati Bhavan. You can see already places like this here on the side, and here on the flanks here. Barracks were built, Second World War. You can see all these places here and here. Lots of barracks built for offices. Makeshift structures were put in place at that time. Later on, one whole new street was added, and in the 60s, many new government buildings were added. Yeah, so you have Rail Bhavan, Vayu Bhavan, you have Shastri and Udyog Bhavan, and various other structures. You can still see some of the barracks still there in the 60s. When, unfortunately, after that, it was all somewhat downhill, because this was the only plan that was used to administer this entire magnificent space that you have here. It became a sort of a plotted development. The flanks were plotted out and handed over to different ministries to build their own buildings. And you can see here all of these plots, Nirman Bhavan, Shastri Bhavan. These were built in the 60s, and then Jawar and archives, etc. So this was the vision. This was what was done in 1930s. And this is what the Vista was. That's what it is today. Okay, so you can see, I just go back one step here and another here. What's it like today? So it's a magnificent icon still. Seat of India's government, a heritage asset, precious civic space, Delhi's most visited tourist destination. It's truly a magnificent place that is there. But it's a hodgepodge of ill-matched activities, as you can see here. The administrative facilities in blue, you can see culture, some cultural facilities, some legislative facilities, some residential facilities. Rashtrapati Bhavan, Vice President lives here, some defense quarters here. More importantly, 22 out of the 51 ministries are actually located in this area. This was meant to be the place where the entire administration is located. Rest of them are located in far-flung places like this. Here in these plots that you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the old barracks were converted into offices. Some of them were stables and barracks, all converted into offices, and they continued to be used by defense personnel. You have the dental department of the government of the army here. Not very important for it to be in this location. So that's what the barracks look like here. This is the view from North Block. And there's the public access to this whole area is diminished because of the security requirements in the area. It's not very easy to maintain security. So whenever Prime Minister is in the office, the place gets barricaded and not really accessible. That's the public zones are this little sliver of land here, and that's what the public space is for the Central Vista. If you look at the architectural character, there's a sort of hodgepodge of incoherent sort of buildings here. And if you look at the way land is used, most of it is used for parking in this manner, very haphazard, very, very poor use of land. If you want to add new buildings, it's very difficult to do so. If you look at the offices themselves, I don't know how many of you have visited the offices from inside, but they're really poor quality places to work. These are the sort of the better of the offices that we found there. The cultural facilities, as for example, IGNCA, etc., are also not very upscale or proper. The older buildings, that's the Parliament. Lots of additions, alterations have been made, and you can see that the cabling, the infrastructure, the electrical requirement, the air conditioning requirements, all these things that have been put in over the years have destroyed the character and really damaged the buildings. The public space, the landscape is quite lackluster, and poorly managed streets, inadequate pavements, really no arrangements for parking for number of tourists that come here. And it has inadequate infrastructure for national events such as the Republic Day Parade. Very few facilities for tourists, though large numbers of people come here. So over decades, many people, many institutions have demanded that the Central Vista should be better administered, better developed, better maintained, and that its heritage should be protected. And so that's what this project is about. The master plan for this project started with a sketch developed in response to very, very broad requirements and very minimal information about the site. And this is, I believe, as it should be, start off with a sketch. What we did was look at all the books that were available. This was already at the competition stage. Looking at, fortunately, there's lots of good history, documentation of the space here. And thank God for Google, because there's so much information available there. You can build terrain models, etc., from all the information there. So this is the master plan that was envisioned in October 2019 as a response to the competition. And of course, it has been evolving. And as you can see here, there are many versions of it over time. That's 4th of November, version 3, 4 December. And as we found more information, more opportunities became clear, challenges became clear, and the master plan kept evolving as we went along. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is the 15th of March 2020. No, that's even further, more evolution there. Then, of course, it's more of fine-tuning after that. And I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the master plan that is current. That's the 17th September 2021 master plan. So this is what was imagined in 1930. This, as I said, is what we made of it over the years. And this, in the same style, is drawn up what the master plan is going to be today. Let me go over it piece by piece. I'm not going to explain the whole thing here, but we'll. So what are the objectives of this project? That's a way of hanging this whole presentation together. First is modernizing and expanding Parliament's facilities. So we started off by trying to understand the facilities, and that, you know, is the circular building located in this triangular plot here on this side. And we studied the early drawings. Baker wanted to do a different type of building. You can see a sort of a triangular arrangement on the right-hand side. Lutyens did not allow him to do that, wanted him to build this circular building. This is what got built. We could not find good drawings of the place, so our study had to start with reconstructing all the drawings from old archival drawings like this and old archival pictures of this sort. That's the central hall, the way it used to be. It has been modified considerably. It was modified considerably for the Constituent Assembly. Then we mapped all the spaces, as one has to in these sort of buildings, very complex requirements. We studied all the furniture here in considerable detail. We studied the expansion possibilities. Now, you know, that's the Lok Sabha chamber. And what you see here is, this was a hall meant for 150 people, but we've managed to put in 552 seats. You can see that space behind the columns is also used up. There's no chance, we understood very quickly, of adding any more seats here. And one of the needs was to add seats to this hall. That's the central hall. It houses only 436 seats. We counted all the heads here. And they put in a lot of temporary chairs during joint sessions and other events, big fire risk, etc. But that's how the whole place works. It's a bit of a jugaad, the whole arrangement here. Lots of encroachments. This is a well inside the Parliament building. All the spaces have been modified. Corridors have been enclosed. Windows have been closed down, and it's a mess of infrastructure additions out here. The offices inside look like this. As you can see here, these are, a variety of interiors. You can see a hodgepodge of offices, very crowded. And I showed you earlier this picture. That's the state of the building. You can see the infrastructure, the mess of infrastructure. That's cables going in of this sort, and air conditioning ducts and plumbing ducts, etc. There are foul smells coming. You don't know where from. You look at the technology there. It's quite antiquated. It reminds you of that old rail carriages here. The mics can't be shut off, for example, which is why the din in the Lok Sabha can never be controlled. And its seismic safety is also of a big concern here. So we quickly realize that it's a much valued facility, symbol of India's vibrant democracy. But we are going to, if we want to modernize it, if we want to expand it, we are going to have to create a new facility, retrofit the old building, and use the two together in conjunction with one another. So here's the design for the new Parliament building. As you well know by now, it's a triangular building right next to the round building here. We use the plot. Earlier, this plot used to have parking, barracks for security staff, reception, a hodgepodge of facilities. It was a walled compound. So all of this belonged to the Parliament, and we decided to make use of the space that was poorly used just now. The design, of course, has gone through many, many iterations, and it's this last version. Also, its elevations. Anybody who is a designer knows that you go through many iterations as this design evolves. And as you can see here, this image is quite well known. That's the circular building and the triangular. They are similar size and bulk here. So here you are. You have a round building surrounded by streets on all sides. These are public streets, but these are already private, because on this side there is the library and the Parliament annex. Okay, and that's Vijay Chowk here. We are facing north up in that direction. So the underpinning geometry, it was clear that for a building of this stature, there had to be a strong underpinning geometry. That's what you will find with most such buildings. And it's a triangular grid, which we sort of slowly came to this sort of a structure. And that's where the building sits in perfectly on this triangular grid. And just to give you a sense of what is where, you can see here that the three vertices have the ceremonial entrances on this side. This here is the Lok Sabha chamber. That's the Rajya Sabha. There are three more entrances that lead you in from here. And there's a big central sort of a hall. And that's the central lounge and courtyard. Just to explain to you, joint sessions used to be held in the central lounge in the old building. The central hall, and the central hall also functioned as a sort of lounge with these seats in rows. All the MPs would hang out there, and that's where they had their lounge. So this functioned, central hall in the old Parliament building functioned both as a lounge and as a hall for the joint session. What is now being done is that the joint session will be held in the Lok Sabha, and because it's large enough for that. And the lounge has been created around this courtyard in this place. So both functions separated out and work much better now. And so here's a plan, same thing. I'm not going to go over this again. The only thing I forgot to mention is that on the perimeter, we have offices, ministers' offices, staff, various administrative offices. And these things here are offices for the Lok Sabha administration, and these are offices for the Rajya Sabha administration. Just let me go to the Lok Sabha here. That's the Lok Sabha hall. These images now become fairly well publicized. Okay, and let me just explain what happens here. That's the Rajya Sabha. I'm first going to run through all the facilities. Sorry. That's the Rajya Sabha. That's the Rajya Sabha hall. The two halls, as you can see, are similar. One is in green, one is in red. These are traditional colors. That's the central lounge and courtyard. Okay, so that's the courtyard you have here and the lounges all around. These are the lounge facilities there. There's a library around this courtyard also. And these are the offices, the MP offices on the sides and also offices for other staff of the parliament. These are ministers' offices of this sort. These here are committee rooms. Many committee rooms are required, so there are many of these sorts. There are 6 large committee rooms. That's the Constitution Hall in the center. I'll just give you a quick view of that, but we'll come to more of this later on. Now let me explain some details, and I'm not going to explain details about all the projects, but for Parliament, I just thought I'd spend a little bit of time explaining what it's about for Lok Sabha here. Sorry, for the Parliament as a whole and the Lok Sabha here. So here you have the comparison of the old Lok Sabha and the new one. What's clear is that you have 470 square meters here, you have 1,300 square meters. This one houses 552 people, this one houses 772 people. And of course, it has space enough for the joint session, at which point it holds 1,000 people. This one has, the lobby at the back, where the lobby gets locked up when the parliament when Lok Sabha is in session. So that's a tiny lobby here, and we have a nice lounge outside where people can sit. There's administrative offices are of similar size but better designed, and there's terrible emergency evacuation facilities here, practically non-existent. So here there are very good emergency evacuation facilities, a big concern after the scare a few years ago. We decided to keep the horseshoe-shaped seating arrangement that we have. Everybody was happy with that, and they wanted to continue with that. They wanted to continue with the green hall. If you look at the Lok Sabha itself, here you have the chamber, Lok Sabha chamber. This is the Lok Sabha Secretariat at the back. I told you various things. This is the lounge, all the space all around. That's the ceremonial foyer and entrance. During joint sessions, the president and a prime minister come in from here, and the procession comes up here, and they sit in this area. So the seating arrangement was completely changed. Sorry about these colors here. Here you can see, what we have is bench-type seating in the Lok Sabha at present. Now, bench-type seating means that people have to walk in front of you and get to their seat. So the corner seats are prized. Because you can then walk up without disturbing everybody. And that now we have changed the arrangement so that people will be able to move from the back and sit down. Everybody gets a corner seat. The seat size is better. It's a little more comfortable. This was pretty tight for a chair that you have to stay in for long periods of time. Nobody got, except the first 2 rows, nobody had desks. Now everybody will have desks. The movement, as I explained, in front of the seat, now people are going to move from the back of the seat. The technology is digital touch screens for everybody because you need a lot of information there. And the standing space is uncomfortable here. It's comfortable. So a lot of the arrangement is simply about making the seating work better. Remember that this was a hall for 150 people. Now it's being used by 550 people. So it never meant to be this. So it's just, this was never meant to be Parliament building. This was meant to be Council House. Okay. So here it's getting a little bit faded out, but that's the well of the house. You can see here, that's the well of the house here. That's where the speaker sits. That's where the prime minister sits. Now the well of the house is a little more spacious, and there are reasons for that. Presently, when you see, when the prime minister wants to look at the head of the opposition, then he has to ask the Secretary General to sort of move back a bit. So let me look at that. And they want to so on and so forth. And it's very, very uncomfortable here. The heads of these people get in the way of heads of other people. It's pretty simple sort of problems of that sort. So now the arrangements are so that they can look at each other and look at the speaker, and the sight lines are all very clear now. So there's a lot of logistics of that sort. The well has been lowered a little bit so that people can people sitting here, but you can still see right across. Here you can see this is a 3D printed model that we made to explain to them how the well is lowered and how papers can be passed to these officers here. There's lots of tiny logistics in this. This person has to be able to get up and whisper something to the speaker, etc. So all of those sort of arrangements have been done. The aesthetic theme inside the Lok Sabha chamber that informs all the fabrics, all the carpets, etc., is based on the idea of the national bird. Now, let me just explain very quickly. I mean, this institution is an institution that welds India's diversity into a sort of a nation, into the unity of a nation. So we have some symbols of its unity as a nation here, and one of them is the use of national bird in this place, and I'll explain the other symbols later on as we go further. Here is the image of it. You can see, let me just go to a little more details. The ceiling is based on the pattern of a peacock's feathers here. That's the ceiling mock-up of the ceiling being prepared in Bombay right now, because it's all going to be made in Bombay and transported to Delhi. Here you have the carpet. The carpet is also developed based on the pattern derived from peacock feather. You can see that's the pattern that's been done. I'm sorry that the colors are all getting but it's darker towards the center and it becomes lighter as you go out. Okay, that's the carpet mock-ups being checked out by the interior designer here, and that's the carpet being manufactured in Uttar Pradesh. It's a hand-woven carpet, and this is for the Rajya Sabha. This is not for the Lok Sabha. That's why it's red. And that's the fabric for the seats that's being designed here in Bangalore. There's the panels. There's lots of at the back here. You can see there will be natural light coming into the halls, and the jali on top. The pattern for the jali is based on the theme of peacock, and here are some mock-ups being made. These are the jalis that will go up on top here. Of course, lots of acoustic requirements have to be fulfilled. Presently the din in the house is terrible because the acoustics are very, very poor there, and that's being designed well. The technology is very going to be sophisticated with the audio-visual system, the digital monitors. So it's a well modernized. That's the furniture. You can see that's a wide seat, so that's for 2 people, and then 3 people can sit here when you have joint sessions. So the seats have also been specially designed for this. This is a mock-up that we did. So is there enough space to walk at the back? Because every inch counts in a design like that. And that's the mock-up that we made for the Lok Sabha seats, digital panels, all of them being reviewed by the staff in the Lok Sabha. These are the decorations on the wooden panels. They're not so strong. They're actually quite subtle. They're wood on wood, but the colors are getting lost here. Different tables have different sorts of patterns, all derived from the peacock feather. This in the center is so that was about the Lok Sabha chamber. Here you have the Constitution Hall in the middle. This is the memorable space that people will remember the Parliament. There are 3 approaches to it. Okay, and in the center is what we are calling the Constitution Hall. You can see it has a height of 21 meters. This is the big memorable space in the middle, somehow signifying the unity of the nation and the main principles of the parliament. That's a big hall. There's sort of light coming in from top. The false ceiling here represents the cosmos. This layer is the prayers of India, and at the bottom here we have people, and there's Foucault's pendulum in the middle that will signify the passing of time. I could get into more details about that, but that's just to give you a sense of. So here we have a relief work. That's the diversity, the people of India. That's the relief here. There's on here the prayers that were said during the Bhumi Pujan are all going to be here, 12 prayers. On that side here, you can see the Constitution Gallery where the Constitution will be placed. Okay, and so that's where the Constitution is. Here we plan that there will be the Tagore poem about his vision for what the nation should be. And that will be there. Here you have the Foucault's pendulum, and you have the astrolabe that defines Delhi. On the ceiling, you have the star map on 26th of January 1950, when the Constitution came in force. So this is a sort of a hall. That's where the Constitution will be placed. And here there are artifacts that are from Indian history. So the rule of law in Indian history signified through the artifacts from various periods. People are working on these issues right now, and there are a bunch of people fleshing out what this concept can be. These are the ministers' offices. On the side here, you can see that was the sort of 3D visualization first. That's the furniture for it, lots of detailed furniture. That's the mock-ups being checked out. And here is the actual physical mock-up made in Delhi, because we had to test it and check whether that would be okay. So that's a mock-up for the minister's office. If you look at the sections and elevations, basically the main idea I want to talk about here, that the overall height and bulk of the building, you can see the two are similar. So they're going to sit right next to each other, I believe quite comfortably right next to each other. We wanted them, the facades, the elevations to be harmonized with one another. So the old Parliament building became the starting point, and a number of studies of what we would do. Our building is at one level thoroughly modern. It's a concrete structure, frame structure. So how do you make that sort of a facade which is matching with this? And this is what we have come up with finally. As you can see here, that's one end of it. And that's the side entrances, as you can see, coming into this place. And that's the stone pattern here. And this is the stone mock-ups being tried out for the samples for how the stone will be on the Parliament building. Here we have the Ashok Chakra on the entrances. You saw the national motto, Satyamev Jayate there. And that's this. Lots of detailing for what the decorations on the side will be like. That's the brass panel that is there at the back here. That's the jalis on top that will shade the windows at the back, and these are picked up from historical references of this sort, and that's how the jali mock-up is being done right now. Before I end, that's the building, of course, has all of these things that we see, but inside it's a lot of infrastructure. That's what all the designers have done. I've shown you, but there's lots of engineering involved in the buildings. The architects here, of course, know this, but it's a complex building, and a lot of engineers are also trying to get all the engineering right inside here. The air conditioning, HVAC, the security arrangements, a lot of things there. Construction is in progress, as you know. This is a month ago. Lots is built. Most of the structure will be ready by January. Okay, and that's one of the chambers coming up. Tata Projects are working on this, as many of you might know. And today we know that there are 328 days left. We are all racing against the clock. There's a desire to see this finished for the winter session, December in 22. So everybody is working towards that. Now I come to one other aspect of the parliament. In this site here, we are going to build, this is the site, 2 old ministry buildings are to be replaced by chambers for members of parliament, 1,000 offices, because presently the MPs have no offices. So in Delhi, they operate out of home and various other places, and it's a bit of jugaad for their offices, which is now going to be replaced by chambers right next door here. Of course, there'll be a tunnel connecting them directly to the parliament building, so that there's the security, the people that need a lot of security, we are all going to, hopefully, once the tunnels are done, they will be moving below grade, so that people on top, the public, can have easier access to parliament. Okay, so that was now I need to move fast. That was the parliament building, and I'm not going to spend so much time talking about the details. The next objective, as I said, is improving efficiency and productivity of administration by building a central secretariat. Okay, so that central secretariat is these buildings here. You have 9 buildings with courtyards here, your conferencing facility, you have the archives, and you have 2 buildings here. So there's a total of 11 office buildings, archives, and conferencing center. And that's the central secretariat that I'm referring to. The current ministry offices, this is the entrance gates. These are, I don't need to talk about how haphazard the arrangements are right now. You can see these are the entrances to our to the most important ministries. Foreign trade, for example, goes in through a gate like that. These are the offices inside. They're cramped, dispiriting places at this point. The furniture is very. These are not conducive to efficiency and productivity, these office buildings. Okay, and they have been added to, and they were built in the 60s, but are heavily stressed right now. So all the ministry offices will be consolidated at one place. So there are, for those who are worried about densities, presently there are 41,000 employees working within this blue line here. Okay. Now, 9,000 of them are defense personnel who do not need to be here. Okay. They are in these barracks that I told you about. And they're being moved out to purpose-built facilities at 2 locations. Okay. So 9,000 move out, and about 10,000 are being brought in from these office buildings that are spread out outside. So the overall population will not increase much in this area. So the number of jobs in this area is not increasing much. This is a transit-oriented development. There are 2 metro lines going through here, perpendicularly here, and they connect all of Delhi to this one spot. Okay, and we're putting in a people mover at an underground level so that you can get out of the metro directly. These are like in airports abroad. You can get out of the metro station underground, get into a people mover of this sort, and get to your office building. So it's a transit-oriented development meant to encourage the use of public transport. The office buildings themselves, there are 9 of them here. I'm going to talk about these. They're in 4 plots. Mind you, these are presently fenced government properties. These are not, they're inside presently existing plots of government. Here you have, there are 4 secure plots. I'm going to talk about this one, which is the first one to be built now. You can see there are 3 donut-shaped buildings here. That's the fence here. It's about 500 meters, 600 meters almost, 161 meters across. This is where the Rajpath is and where the public space for the entry to all of these buildings is going to be from here, 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 and here. So not from the public space side. Even today, it's not from the public space side. And there's a loop road inside. Presently, there are many entries. They're all going to be, reduced to 4 entries here. You can see that's one of the entries from Janpath, for example. As you go in here, you have parking. You have large canopies. Lots of cars can stop together. If you take one building here, zoom in here, it's actually a pretty rational, straightforward office building. That's the building has an entry from here, and at this end, okay, that's these are the service cores for the architects here. This is easy to understand. These are large work halls that open onto the courtyard on this side. On the perimeter, we have smaller offices, office spaces. That's the entrance porch, like in an airport. Many cars can stand here because we are consolidating. That's the entrance foyer, reception information. That is the lift lobbies. These are large buildings, so even need movement for disabled people. These are work halls looking into the central courtyard. You can see here the courtyard doesn't have a basement below, so it can have full-grown trees there, like the Habitat Center. There's lots of hierarchy in work arrangements, seating arrangements. All of that has been taken care of. That's the standardized offices for ministers, standardized offices for all the different levels of administration. That's an office for, I think it's for a Minister of State. Many other facilities here, creche, medical facilities, all of these things don't exist at this point. So that's been done. That's that underground people mover here, connected to the metro station. You can see here, there's a large basement connecting all the buildings together, has lots of parking, but essentially has this people mover that grazes past the buildings, you can see here. And you can see that's the basement level. That's the people mover here. On this side, there's a big service bay. That's the people mover coming in. People go up escalators to their various offices. So it's a rational, efficient office building. Okay, and that's the courtyard in the middle with places for people to sit for lunch, cafes. If you see the pictures of the cafes at present or the kitchen facilities, they're really, really poor. When the trees are full grown, it has a covering on top here, and that's to give you a sense. That's the people mover here. That's the basements here. That's the offices, work halls on this side, the courtyard on the other side. Okay. For those who are worried about the height of the building, that's the present building height. It's 20 feet above the level of this topi here for this present Shastri Bhavan. The purple is the present building. This is the new building. When you walk from Rajpath, of course, because of the trees, you don't see the buildings at present. You won't see these new ones either. So they're slightly taller than the present ones. But they will be not that visible. These are not very large buildings. These are buildings like a typical New York skyscraper, but only laid out on the ground like that. It's a 1.1 million square feet building, and that's just a comparison of, these are large scale. People get worried about the scale, but this is not very large for modern buildings. Even in Delhi, you now have buildings of this size. The Central Conference Center will be here. Not much has been designed, so I'm not going to talk about that. The archives presently exist here. There are two parts to this archive. There is the old Lutyens building and an annex building which was built here. And this annex building is very, very bad shape. Its infrastructure is poor. It was built in the 90s. And so that's the old building. That's the new one. That's the old building. Has lovely spaces inside. It will continue to remain, but we'll build a new annex building that will be right here. So this will go away, and a new annex building will come up here. It's still being designed. I'm not going to talk much about that. Cultural recreation facilities, strengthening them. Okay, Central Vista Avenue, and that's the main space here, the main public space here. That's right, this space right in the middle. As you can see, let me talk about that quickly. That's the avenue space. Here, it's a setting for national events. It's also a precious civic space for Delhi. Okay, and it's for Delhi's residents. It's an important place. Tourists come here a lot. Okay, but it's under much stress. As you can see here, that's the space that is available today. Okay, and that's what we are going to make. So first of all, this idea that this space is going to be reduced are false. As you can see here, the space is exactly the same. In fact, it's going to increase in size. Okay, it's walking along the avenue is not comfortable or safe today, or wasn't. This is what Rajpath was like earlier. Okay, and that's what is proposed to be done. And this is a sample stretch that has been done. These are pictures from there. It's all being readied as we talk for the Republic Day parade. There's lots of infrastructure that is being put in below because the parade needs lots of infrastructure. Presently, they do jugaad of cables going on top. The lawns are in very bad shape today. There is going to be a lot more lawns than there are. So they're in bad shape like this because they're not level. There's no watering system. All of that is to be improved. And here is a picture of the lawns as it is coming up. There's a story about different types of grasses that we have used. I'm not going to get into that. These were the walking pathways on Rajpath. These are not really pathways, but bald patches in the lawns. Now we're going to have a lot more pathways, so this place is more accessible. So these are the canals. Earlier, the problem was that on account of the canals, if I just go back here, because of these canals here, okay, all the place at the back was not used much at all. It was inaccessible. Okay, now what we have done is build bridges across this so that the parking can be all at the back here, and you can walk to the central space over the bridges and come. And then there are pathways here. So here are that's the canal as it used to be, painted blue. And this is what is imagined in its place. And this is being built. The entire canal has been rebuilt because it was leaking out here. That's the patch of, that's how the lawn next to the canal used to be. In its place, this is what was proposed. Pathways where you can walk, green space, you can sit, benches, lights, waste paper baskets, stormwater drainage, and that's what has been built. That's a picture of the sample that was taken a few months back. And the parking is all now, instead of being on the streets here, the parking is going to go at the back here, and people will walk to the front from here. So that's what it used to be. And in its place, now we'll get parking of this sort at the back. And that's being built as we talk. The vendors, they all congregate near the busy junctions, and so they will all be at these places. More public conveniences, toilets. The vendors are going to be here. Toilets of this sort are going to be built. These are all lower level, so you see nothing at above 5 feet in that public space. There are underpasses for pedestrians. Earlier, this is how people used to walk. This is a very busy street and really poor facilities, and that's the underpass that is being built right now. Near the India Gate today, this is what the area is like, and this is what is proposed. It's not going to be done this way exactly, but this is definitely going to happen here. The arrangements for Republic Day parade were very poor. This is the kind of, once again, I use the word jugaad, that was done. Fences like that, flag poles, plywood on the lawn here, stands built, takes very long. We propose that instead of doing this sort of stands and this sort of seating here, what we must have is bleachers that can be put here and taken away once the parade is done with. And that's kind of bleachers we proposed, so that actually this one will let everybody get a good view. And so that's what's happening. And these are the new bleachers that have been built. They will be brought in here and transported out. So pretty simple, straightforward sort of arrangements. This was checking out the flooring for the horses, because there's one point where they go up to the president and they wanted to be sure that it works in this area. The trees on Central Vista Avenue have created a lot of controversy for no real reason. That's the present set of trees that you can see here. This is the proposed new master plan, but this is to come into this master plan for trees will be realized over decades as the old trees die. These are the magnificent jamuns there. There are 1,200 jamuns. During Lutyens' time, there were 450. Later on, so this is a Lutyens jamun. These jamuns were planted later on. So from 450, we went up to 1200. Exactly, I think around 23 trees have been transplanted to create toilets and underpasses. Otherwise, all the trees are there. There was a lot of talk about that, so I just want to mention that here. The trees are all there, and we have lovely lawns below. We'll talk more about this if the issue comes up. There are many landscape elements. Instead of benches like this, now there are benches like this. Instead of flooring of this sort, we have really good quality flooring there. Instead of bollards of this sort, cement bollards and chains put in this manner, we have properly done bollards, proper done chains. Light poles now have all LED lighting. Okay, and the signage system is also fairly advanced, good quality signage. That's the designer from Delhi who is working, Lopez. Here, just give you just a quick, that's the section of what is proposed. Most of it is in place for the parade. Some elements are left. So essentially the same space, but refurbished and upgraded and provided with more amenities, more facilities, more lighting. The space is itself a little larger. Okay, and that you have the canal, so it's a magnificent space. Not much had to be done. It just had to be polished up and spruced up and sort of modernized in many ways. So that's the parking at one end, the buildings here. IGNCA used to be in a building with 500 people working in a 25-acre plot. That was the old building of IGNCA. The facilities inside were not something to talk about. That's the kind of arrangement inside IGNCA when you go look at it. The new building is going to be here. It's right across from Hyderabad House, and so the design of it builds on Hyderabad House design. It sort of uses the symmetry here and adds new blocks. I'm not going to talk much more about this. Just leave you with a few images of how this is being designed here. And that's the new IGNCA coming up in this 12-acre plot. So original plot was 25 acres. This is 12 acres here. That's the new IGNCA with its labs and various facilities that they need and a cafe on top. The National Museum, this important part of the story, is presently here. It's 25,000 square meters, and it is the north and south blocks are going to become the National Museum. So these are north and south block administrative offices. At some point, this entire access becomes public. You're able to walk up the hill. Okay, and what buildings are like this? Someday we'll have museums and exhibitions in these halls. So what is presently government buildings will become public facilities of this sort. Modern, secure infrastructure for executive offices. Okay, so here this plot had barracks here. So in this plot, what we are going to do is the PMO, the Cabinet Secretariat, the National Security Secretariat, and the Hyderabad House state functions are all going to happen here. All of these are connected by underground tunnels, so that the Prime Minister's movement is most disruptive. And once that goes below ground in a golf cart or something, then everything else becomes a little easier. This place here, all of these offices in all these different places are being consolidated in one place. You can imagine the amount of dysfunctionality because these things are all spread out over Delhi. They're all coming together in one place. Vice President and Prime Minister, Vice President moves from here, and this plot, which had barracks, is going to be converted into a facility for the Vice President. That's the house for the Vice President. That's the house for the Prime Minister. Moves from 7 Lok Kalyan Marg to this place here. In fact, that and that, Vice President and Prime Minister. These are the houses that are coming up there. So finally, protecting heritage, expanding public space. So protecting heritage, Okay, so all these buildings are being restored and being brought back to their old glory. In a sense, the National Archives, the Parliament, and the North and South blocks. Public space used to be this much here. In fact, it is expanding because the plots are being pulled back here, and expanding up the hill here. And these buildings are also becoming public facilities. And changing the iconography of power. At one point, this was the symbol of the Raj, and our government took it over, and it continued to be the symbol of government and sort of powerful government sitting on hall. And it will now finally change from this to a symbol of Indian. It's a facility for culture and the people of India. With that, thank you very much. Okay.
We'll have the people who have for Q&A, it's open to the floor.
On a couple of other occasions, you've cited the National Mall in Washington, D.C. as a worthwhile precedent for this project. And it is, in the sense, it's the only grand urban axis that's the governmental center of a democracy. But that, the National Mall, as done by the Macmillan Plan, because it was a democracy, was particular that it was lined on either side by public cultural facilities. And the government offices come behind them. Here, if we look at the main vista between Vijay Chowk and the India Gate hexagon, the earlier Lutyens concept of a culture hub at the center is done away with. Whatever cultural institutions were present there are removed, and it's entirely taken up by government facilities. Compensatory public space such as the park by the riverbank and the park in the President's estate are not part of the Central Vista experience, so don't change that. And there's still quite a few open questions on the conversion of North and South Block into the National Museum. So how does this loss of public space, I understand in the Vista itself, close to 80 acres have been rezoned from public, semi-public into government offices. So how does this reflect on being the heart of a democracy where the public face really should be a dominant aspect?
Listen, first of all, I want to clarify that when the Central Vista was designed, the designer, then Lutyens, etc., they were all looking at National Mall, they were looking at various things. National Mall is different from this one, but not that much. Actually, if you look at it, all the buildings that are being built are inside present government compounds, except for IGNCA. IGNCA is moving to the hexagon. Okay, so it has a 12-acre plot. So presently, government plot is becoming IGNC. So the cultural facility remains there. The National Museum is going to a building that is 5 times bigger and at the center of the axis. There's no questions about the National Museum moving. It's moving. There's no question. It's going to, what presently is North and South Block is becoming the National Museum. So what we have, unlike the mall, everything doesn't have to be like Washington. Unlike the mall, we have a grand public space in the middle, which is being expanded, physically expanded. Okay? There's no diminishing of that space. In fact, presently inaccessible places are being made accessible. The space, you have to come with me to Delhi at some point, and you have to see what it feels like. I've taken many people there. Fence to fence, the space was not used. Now it's going to be used. So it's much bigger space when you look at usability. At one end of it, you're going to have the Grand National Museum. At the other end, the hexagon has cultural facilities. So unlike the Washington Mall, where the cultural facilities are on 2 sides and you have a monument on one end and you have a government building at the other, we have people's sort of cultural facilities at the 2 ends. And we have government buildings, all accessed from the other side, and a grand public space in the middle. So I've never really understood why physically the space is increasing. All the institutions are there. The institutions are increasing in size. They are getting a more prominent place than they have at present. How is it changing the character? In fact, it's improving. It's deepening the democratic character of this space. So I guess I beg to differ on the point that it is in any ways changing character. In fact, it's becoming more accessible because right from the hill up to the hexagon is all becoming accessible, where people will be able to walk that 3-kilometer length. Perhaps someday you will have a hop-on, hop-off bus that takes you to the different museums, go up the hill, go to the Great National Museum. It's in fact becoming a lot more like Paris's Champs-Élysées, where you have the Louvre, which used to be the Palace of the King one day. The Palace of the King turned into a museum. That's that moment here. The grand bastion of government is being converted into a museum. So in fact, it begs the question, why it is not democratic?
Hi, Bimal. I'm an architect, so I'm looking at it as a perspective of some of the audience maybe more. And I appreciate the idea of, there are a lot of problems that existed with individual buildings, and I think a lot of what you portrayed were kind of solutions to things that needed to be done. So we totally understand that. But I'm trying to see as an architect, and how does a project of this scale get envisaged so quickly, and how is this? And it's, I may not be seeing it, so that's why I'm asking you the question. And how is this, which wasn't touched, as you mentioned, for so many years, and therefore came to a particular place? Is the solution for the rest? Do we need more time to come up with the right answer? Is my question. And do you, and I see it as a practice, and sometimes I think some things need more time to develop or research ideas on, to come up with, may not be the perfect solution, but a solution that has layers in it. Okay. And have we had the time with this answer?
Yeah. I'm an architect like you.
Yeah.
And I always want more time. There's no question. And I haven't, I haven't met a client in India who's not in a hurry. Okay. There are industrialists who want to make that window of opportunity when the financial year changes. And we have to get the production going, my industry must be ready. When I was building the Indian Institute of Management campus, they wanted it ready for the next academic session. Okay. People who want to move into their houses on Dussehra, things like that. Everybody in India is in a hurry. And so in some sense, yes, this is in a hurry. Here are people wanting to do it fast. But think about it. The parliament gets 3 years to do. Yes, if it had been 4 years, would it have? Would it not? In fact, there's such a deep sort of desire originally to see it ready for 15th of August 22, 75th year of Indian independence. Wouldn't that be something terrific symbolically to have our own parliament? That was the kind of feeling in this. And so this was, the parliament, but the COVID made it not possible to do that. And we're trying to make it for the winter session. Yes, it does crunch work, but you and I as architects also know that sometimes a lot more time doesn't help either. So yes, you have to be super efficient. There are literally, at one stage, there were 450 people working on different aspects of the design. It's a complex building. It needs to be done. I don't know if I've answered your question. Yes, I would have liked a little more time, but I don't think time always helps. Also, you can finish up. It's a complex project that is also complex because, if I remember, the whole thing is not going to be finished in 24 or anything like that. It's going to go up till 26. Starting from 19 to 26 is in 7 years. The question is why it had not been done for 40 years before that. Everybody was talking about the problem. The problems were all existing for many years. That's not a question for me to answer. There's a resolve now, and they want to do it, and this is how we are approaching it. Anyways, we get to more as we...
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Patel, for that incredible presentation. Of course, we discussed, lots of fundamental issues we had with the project, but of course, when you're picking curtains and carpets for the project, maybe that ship has sailed. So I thought maybe I'd ask you a question about the future, about what you think this project means. And I have kind of three angles that I hope you will address. The first is, how should we be building things in the future, and how does this project sort of show us that? The photographs that you showed us of, construction sites look awfully familiar. The renderings, if I say so, just by looking at those renderings, they look like they're just clad RCC structures. So just if you were to just talk about what these buildings mean in sort of setting our course, because this is really, a signature project for us. The second angle would be what you think this means, and maybe you've answered some of that to Prem's question, what it means to make cities and communities at this scale, given that you've worked on very, very large projects in the country. How do you see your role as an architect in defining those relationships? And how do you articulate that as a singular source? Of course, you've got your big team working with you, but in terms of shaping, and maybe Suchet's question was kind of about that, like, do you need more time to think about it, even conceptually, not just to sort of roll out with it because your client asked you to do that? And the third thing, I think the most essential thing is in our own sort of shared consciousness, in our own sort of expression as a community, as an architect, how do you think, of course, this is a big public project. It requires a lot of stakeholders. It involves, of course, the government, but also all of us. How do you see us as architects? And this is a general question. How do you see us as architects working on projects of this kind, articulating that as a shared idea of what the place should be, which through all of your presentations and we've been following your project closely, it's very difficult for us to know what those processes are that have informed your project other than your client's brief and patronage. Thank you.
So many issues in there. Let me see if I get to some of these. Yes, everybody's in a hurry and people want to do things fast, and sometimes they cannot be done as fast as they want it. And I say, no, cannot be done. But when I feel that it can be done, I'm quite happy to go ahead and accept the challenge. So after COVID, the desire to still see it done on August 15th was impossible, and we said this cannot be done. So there are stages. So obviously, I do believe that this challenge can be tackled. It's not impossible. Many of the buildings are being designed in stages. Not everything has started as yet, and many will happen. With regards to any architectural project, well, let me first talk about the architecture here. One thing was clear from the beginning, or let me preface it with something else. How do you approach these large projects? Okay, and I've said on earlier occasions, as problem solving, clearly at one level. At every level, from practical problems, functional problems to aesthetic, it's problem solving. You're looking at what problem there is, what exists, and you try to solve it. So that's one thing. There, large portion of it is actually functional problem solving, but there is also the aesthetic dimension of what this place needs. Now, it was absolutely clear when first saw the site, that the real architects, if you look at the site as a whole, the real spectacle there already exists. Okay? The North Block, South Block, Rashtrapati Bhavan, India Gate at the other end with the jamun trees, this already exists. You don't need to change that. You need to clean it up, you need to improve it, but you don't need something else there that is going to distract attention away from that. So when we did the office buildings, which by the way are never going to be seen from Rajpath, okay, we said these are functional office blocks. Even from the streets on the other side, they can barely be seen because of the trees. And these are therefore fairly muted in their language. Okay, so that's the. With regard to the parliament, what it required there was, we said that this has to work next to the old parliament, and we wanted the two to be harmonized, not something to be completely different. As I explained to you, we were very careful in trying to make the two languages work together. So they're not completely mimicking the old parliament, but if somebody were to look at it, they would be able to say that these are, well, cousins, if not twins or siblings, So they're similar. And that's rest of the vocabulary, rest of the aesthetic of it comes out from the design itself. Okay, there's not, it's a building that's how you evolve the design. And therefore it needed to be a contextual design of that sort. With regard to the landscape, it was, we were very restrained in what needed to be done in the landscape. The pathways are simple, the benches are simple. They're not trying to draw, they're not like a vision that has been stamped there. So restraint in the office buildings and in the landscape is primarily what, and the stone that has been used is all of the color, at least, of the present one. So red band below, and so this was just so that we would harmonize with the rest of the buildings. And that was the sort of idea there. Now, there were some other questions in there, but I've forgotten them.
I can't help getting the feeling that the whole thing is being done with an indecent sense of hurry. Why do I say that? Because a major transformation of an iconic area like Central Vista should have been discussed in a public forum. What are the alternatives? What is the urgency about it? And also whether, in addition to the additional accommodation required for the government, are there any alternatives in terms of moving some of the offices out of Delhi? A whole lot of consultation and heritage issues and architectural issues and all that, I think, should have been discussed in the public forum. As far as I know, there was no such thing. And that is why I feel that the whole project has some hidden agenda which has not been publicized and which we don't know. Lastly, from the pictures that you have shown, the architecture, interior architecture and external appearance lacks the classical look that the existing buildings have. I don't know whether it's deliberate or it is just the modern construction practice and that's why it has been adopted. Therefore, I feel that on the whole, this project has been a megalomaniac dream. Sorry to say that.
Well, I didn't see the question in there, so I won't respond to that.
I sort of, in a way, want to just add to what this gentleman just said and said to say that, it does seem to have been done in unseemly haste. There was no public consultation at all. I mean, if there's this fabulous project that's going to be there and it's going to become a reality, whether we like it or not, why couldn't it have been put out in the public space? Why couldn't you have taken the people of Delhi into confidence? What is it that rushed all your plans and all through when ordinary people have to wait for months to get their plans sanctioned? And also, in the same vein, for one more thing, now that construction in Delhi has been halted due to pollution, same rules don't apply to the Central Vista project. I mean, all these things are actually hurting the people of Delhi. And I think that for a project of this scale, it would have been really good if you had carried the people of Delhi with you rather than alienating them and putting them behind big walls. I feel about this really, really strongly.
I can see that. Let me try and respond to that. It's really a comment made to government, so it's not for me to respond to it. And with regard to, I've been involved in public projects since 25 years. My first public project was a street design 25 years ago. And I would agree with you that in general, in our country, we lack a culture of government going out and explaining things to people. But let me tell you, in my experience, this is true from municipal levels to the central level. I have always, I'm telling you what my experience is. When I was doing, for example, the street project in Ahmedabad 25 years ago, and I would tell the commissioner, let us go and make an exhibition about this, they would say, kya zarurat hai, ho jayegi, uske baad dekh lenge log. One finds this as a sort of an attitude that runs through a lot of our public institutions. And in fact, the idea that that people in authority have to explain things to other people seems to not have fully matured here. And I agree with you on that. Having worked at various levels, I tend to think that it also has something to do with us as a society at large. Okay, it's not something, and I'm just sharing my thoughts. I'm not making excuses for anybody because I wish this were better. I'm with you on that I wish these systems were better. We had better systems for explaining things to people, and that would help, I think. But that is a thing that has to evolve over a period of time. As a society, we are still pretty feudal. We are still pretty patriarchal, very, very sort of top-down, where older siblings, believe they don't have to explain to their younger siblings. Parents don't feel they have to explain to their children. And it's somewhat that culture that I've seen permeating everywhere. Once again, let me state that I'm not making an excuse. I'd love to see this change, but it's a change that we are all going to have to make over a period of time. It's not going to happen in a hurry. And of course, there's a dissatisfaction with this, which you have said, and I accept that, what you say.
I'll keep mine to a question and not make a statement. But I have to say something before that. I appreciate your point of the whole reversal of the iconography of power, but I felt that what I have seen of this in other states, particularly in, say, in Germany, where Norman Foster was asked to redo the Reichstag, the pictures you showed of the central parliament are probably the only time we are ever going to see it, all of us sitting in this room. But this whole idea of a transparency being echoed by the architecture, that in the Reichstag, you can actually go on top of it and look into the parliament and see the guys actually doing what they're supposed to be, the lawmakers supposed to actually at work. And to some extent, the Westminster, which is being renovated now as we speak, is actually bringing in that logic that the people are not to be kept outside the halls of power, and we only see renderings and pictures of what may transpire, or perhaps on Lok Sabha television. One, why was that not a consideration? Two, the Prem, I think, brought up this idea of the Central Mall in Washington. We don't have to be that. I agree that with the cultural buildings, but what is important to realize in both the Champs-Élysées and in the Central Mall, if you cite them as precedents for what you did, is that there is a diversity of buildings on the Vista. There's the African Museum, there's the Smithsonian Museum. Each one is different, and it sort of reflects something of the cultural aspirations of these people. I understand these are all government ministries. I cannot understand why you chose to make all of them the same. Or perhaps like what Suchet pointed out or Bijoy pointed out, could it have been a good idea to involve maybe other architectural practices with capability, of course, to be able to work on some of these buildings so that some amount of architectural diversity comes there in the project. The third point I want to make is, why is it in India that we are bound by the weight of tradition when it comes to repeating elevations and stone cladding? I can see that the materials used are red sandstone, Dolpur cladding on top of what, to Bijoy's point, why is it that the buildings are not much more transparent in terms of using a lot more glass? Glass is not a bad thing if you know how to use it correctly. And it also sort of reflects a somewhat, I know the workings of government offices are opaque and they want to keep it as much from the people as possible, but at least in a physical sense, if it could have been done like that, I feel it would have been a smarter thing. So 3 points. Why were the people not brought into parliament? 2, the issue of this tradition versus this thing. And 3, it could have been a chance for maybe a few more practices in India to be able to, each building is 1 million square feet. I'm sure you have enough on your plate, and we could, rather than repeating each 1 million square feet 6 times, 3 more architects could have been brought in. Thank you.
What can I say to that? So, well, that kind of symbolic architectural transparency in the parliament was not something that we thought feasible given the space we had, and the fact that we have Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha. In Norman Foster's building, the opportunity was available because the dome was not existing and he built a building on top. However, even if it's not there now, as you say, the halls are absolutely available on television all the time. So it's not as if this is something that how many people are going to walk around there and look at the, so it's an important symbolic thing to say. But what we have tried to do in this case is to create a sort of a central space that's a memorable public space that people can visit. Also, we've organized the circulation in ways that people can approach it more easily. So yes, physically, more people will be able to go in than earlier, but no, we don't have a dome on top looking down. We don't have to do everything that is done in Germany. The buildings have glass. All the office buildings have glass on the inside. So towards the courtyard, on the outside, towards the courtyard, they're completely glass. Towards the outside, they're stone. Because we need smaller windows, there are smaller offices. And we thought that would work much better. So, but that's as you design as you go along. One of the things that the aspiration of this, of the project, and that we are doing right now, is that they did want standardized offices. They're finding that with all the ministries doing different buildings, it does not work. I mean, it's efficiency, it's standardized modular offices that would work for everybody. All of them connected by a singular train. Now, yes, that was the choice made by them. All of them, they wanted finished within a certain period of time. And so that was a choice made by them. It could have been different in another world, but that's the way it was. So I'm sorry about that, but there are other projects and other capitals, Naresh.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Vinay. I'm a resident of Bangalore, but I lived in Delhi for many years, first as a student and subsequently as an employee of the Ministry of External Affairs. I worked out of JNB, which is a building slated for demolition as part of the redevelopment project. Now, sir, it is right opposite the National Museum. Even if you were to shift the functions of these buildings elsewhere, is it wise to demolish these buildings completely, which is a waste of money and time invested? The JNB, for example, was built only 10 years back and had the highest Griha rating when it was inaugurated. So are these demolitions, is there going to be a rethink on the demolitions? Thank you.
Hi, sir. I would like you to talk a little about the sustainability measures being adopted in the design and execution of this project. Because being where we are today with conclaves like COP26, I believe a project as grand as this should be setting standards and not just adhering to them.
I'm not an architect. Let me clarify. You talked in the beginning about how effectively many of the facilities have run out of capacity. Is there any project you can name which after 20 or 30 years in India has not run out of capacity, has not been poorly managed, hasn't been allowed to run to seed, and hasn't been ruined by the Public Works Department? That's question one. Question two, who is your client? Is it the Prime Minister or Mr. Puri, or is it the people of India?
Yeah, hi. I'm a landscape architect, and I'm only going to ask you questions related to the open space. What I see, and I've seen your presentations before, is that it is sort of like an elitist kind of open space. You've cleaned it up, you've put pathways, replaced some trees, made some patterns of the trees. Where are the hawkers? You've marginalized a lot of people, and you've also taken away the boating. So, it's not a space for the common man to go. I mean, yes, you've shown them sitting on the lawns, but you like to go and buy an ice cream and go and sit there, or buy a balloon or whatever. Those hawkers have just been pushed away. So they've been marginalized, and I don't think this is a space for the common man.
Last question.
A good design, architecture, ambience, atmospherics affects human behavior. Now, would this new design enhance and improve the behavior of the MPs, ministers, and all those people? Because normally customer cognition that we work and then the habitants and all the view. So has any metrics been followed to enhance that in this ambience atmosphere, they are going to be far more productive and better behaved and more humane?
Let me start with it backwards. The last question. I'm not sure whether it can be promised that people, but having been inside the offices and seeing the way in which many people work in Delhi right now, it's quite clear that the present facilities certainly don't make it possible for people to work. Okay. If you have a cabinet secretariat, a cabinet secretary cannot hold a conference of more than 15 people. Okay. And if there are 2 more people, he cannot serve tea. That's not the kind of offices that you can expect any productivity from. So perhaps we won't change behavior, but I think the sheer amount of facility will improve productivity. There's no question about that. Okay. Now, whether the MPs or not behave themselves, don't behave themselves, this is, you're expecting too much from architecture. I don't think that is possible. The lady before that talked about the public space and it becoming elitist and people not being able to come there. 2 things I want to correct. No boating is stopped. The canals are exactly the way they were. In fact, now they will have water, so you'll be able to do boating. Okay, the bridges are far apart. The boating was only in a short span, and that will continue. In fact, you will have boating in more places. The vendors, there are special. I showed a slide which showed that the vendors all congregate near the junctions where the tourists are. And there are vendor plazas that have been created so that they can be a clean place where you could have a lot more vending. Now, this will have to be managed. And if not, there is space there. Ultimately, I can say one thing. The space is not any different. There's pathways, there's light, there is water in the canals, there's green. Let's check it after 6 months. And then you tell me whether people go there or not. Okay? Because already from what I see, from having taken people there, when people actually go and stand there, they say, my God, why was this not done? And I'm not talking about people who are friends or people from government or people from the ministries. I'm talking of the harshest critics that I could find in Delhi. I have taken at least 40 people there individually. When we are alone, I can tell you names of the people who have been there and who go look at the space and say, oh my God, how much, what was that story about? Why this, why that? This is going to work. So I have a bit of faith and confidence in the design from that experience. Lots of landscape architects have also been there. With regard to the question of who ultimately is my client, yes, there's both the people of India and my client is, technically speaking, the Central Public Works Department, which is supposed to build the facilities for all the government departments. So, technically speaking, my client is CPWD. They are the client for every building that was built there. All the buildings, there are huge number of stakeholder consultations from Parliament to all the office buildings. All the people who are going to use these buildings are the people that we have to go and find out what they need, whether the designs are going to work or not. So they are, as users, the first users, they are the people who are, whether they are MPs, whether they are speaker, they're opposition people, etc. Everybody. We have to show people sit on chairs. There are security officers who sit on chairs and tell us whether they're okay or not and things like that. So there's lots of people that we are answerable to who are directly going to use the buildings. As far as the people of India are concerned, yes, certainly. In fact, these ideas that public space should not be diminished, the people of Delhi use the public space and they will eventually be the judge of what comes up there. I suspect that is going to work, and that's what I'm trying to tell you here. With regards to sustainability, the person that asked me earlier, the present buildings are big energy guzzlers, and the simple reason is they don't have air conditioning. They all use window units hanging from the walls outside. They are real energy guzzlers. The fact that we are turning this into large consolidated buildings with efficient systems, all of them have the highest GRIA rating and things like that. So they are far more energy saving than the present facilities. Present facilities are abysmal in the amount of energy they use. So in that sense, they are energy efficient. I don't know what exactly you mean by sustainability, but they are all high grade energy efficient buildings. With regard to the question of whether demolitions will be done or not, now, yes, on the surface it seems, oh my God, this building, you're going to tear it down. But remember, there's a way of looking at how you make decisions about land use. In a city, and I say this from the viewpoint of an urban planner or a person who looks at these issues, in a city, the most precious resource is land. Okay, these buildings, the National Museum as well as the MEA building, the Jawahar Bhavan, make very low utilization of land. If you were to make them stand and push buildings out in Delhi, Delhi would, essentially that's a retrograde step. You are better off very often, and this is a long involved discussion, you're better off very often tearing down buildings and building more floor space in a place where it is poorly used. That is why most cities you will see low FSI buildings or low FAR buildings coming down and higher buildings coming up. That is why we do that in all the cases. But that's an involved discussions and we can talk about it later. But I think backwards I've went through all the four that you talked about.
Thank you, Bimal. Thank you for addressing all the questions within the constraints of the time. I have one last question for you, which is, let's assume you had an open-ended brief and the money that you needed and the time. is this what you would have built without, I mean, at the end of the day, because this is India's largest urban transformation project on scale, it is going to be a demonstration for others to follow and emulate and the like. So is this as a legacy, do you see is something free of constraints? I understand, and it's been guided more by functionality over form also seems to be coming through. So how do you see this? Because this is going to be part of your legacy too.
So I say this as an architect, as a person who's also an urban planner and an urban designer. 101%. This is exactly what I would do. 101%. I'm not making excuses here.
Thank you, Bimal. Thank you, Bimal, for that.